Tuesday, NASCAR chat. NASCAR blah. Maz blah. Welcome to the drive. Let's just call it that. The Tuesday drive. Where I just talk about what's going on in the present, at least where the digestion or the churn of the microwave and the fucking everything else is going on in here. The topic I'm currently at battle with and I'm being challenged with is symmetry. Because the lens, the mental model, the cheapened mental model operates from symmetry. And I'll speak of this in a structural sense so we stay on point, so we get references. I'll do my best. This might be a really long-handed one, and I don't mind that it's going to go this way because it's something new. Let's break a container and a boundary here. All right. So geometry is just a tool to measure symmetry in some form of shape or linear fashion, and it's very easy to learn the skill. I wouldn't say it's easy, but to learn the skill using your visual aids to see and identify symmetry is something I think that we all innately have, whether it's consciously recognizable or not. I think we have ingrained senses to understand when something isn't balanced or isn't of equal proportion left or right, or something's angularly off. It's like, when you go to buy a house and you go to inspect it and something just feels off about the freaking house. It's beautiful and it's everything that you think you'd ever want, but there's just something off about it. In my experience, the chances are is that like one side of the room's off square and you just recognize that there's 2 degrees out in a corner, or part of the structure, the foundations is sunk like 2 centimeters. You don't think you pick up on this stuff, but you actually do, when you're present to something that has your attention, right? And that could possibly be something. Hey, that was cool. I just dodged something. There we go. We're talking about attention. There was a massive thing in the middle of the road. Multitasking at its best. All right. So it's like attention to a lens. It's a focal point. So if your lens has been modeled to look for geometry, and that is like your compass for life, eventually at some point in time that becomes really easy. But now this is where it starts to get this is where I'm being challenged, and I'm having to actively surrender to is that moving past this perfection of symmetry, there is like chaos. And what I mean by that is like when you start looking, let's go back to the body again. We look for a straight spine, we look for level shoulders, level eyes, like a jaw that's not cocked sideways, a head that's not twisted. We're not in a scoliosis, not like a leg length discrepancy, 1 foot turned out, 1 foot straight, blah blah, right? Muscles as well. That structurally, it's like a bicep bigger than the other, a lat that's like heavier than the other, so that's like the measuring stick that most of us look at it, seem to look at it through. Seem to, not all of us, right? But this is what I call the joke of the gods, is that we've been conditioned to think this way. We've been given mirrors and tools that measure angles to understand that structurally we are optimal when we're in geometrical symmetry and in the ratios. There's golden ratios within the body. There's lots of people that have created their ideals of such that create the ideal environment and the physique for people. this is the thing. It's like when you start understanding that life itself is never still. It doesn't matter like how still you perceive things to be. Life is never still. There is always a map or terrain where something is always moving and in chaos. You know, and this might feel like it's like full TISM dial 20 million at the moment, but like the truth is that nothing is ever still. There is always some sort of chaos that you are having to deal with constantly. Whether it's cellular, whether it's like external, whether it's relational, whether it's this or that, there is constantly chaos. And balance is not always in symmetry. You know, this is the thing. And I'll get back to the body part of this thing, but when you start to understand that, you know, balance isn't in symmetry, even when you look at like wavelengths and frequency, that equilibrium that strikes right through the middle point isn't always where the amplitude and the magnitude seem to balance in the perfect harmonizing syn waves, I might say, for reference. Like there is a lot of disruption within that, and it's in frame by frame that you're able to find the balance within this chaos. It's like I don't know if you guys have ever rock balanced or done rock Buddhas or whatever. There's a central point that runs through the middle, but you know, the asymmetry in the structure itself is, if you've understood, you're just finding the balance points between these things, and you know, they look balanced in an asymmetrical way. So back to the body, you have an asymmetrical terrain internally. Your organs are orientated in a way that aren't in symmetry. So if the lens externally is to be in symmetry and in ratio, but you haven't with intense intentional investigation and observation, given yourself the attention at that level internally, that you have mapped out what your vitals are doing, where they are in your body, and how to utilize them for the chaos of life other than just automated survival, you won't recognize that these asymmetries are actually part of the experience that you're supposed to go through. You're supposed to map within yourself. Balance and comfort isn't within the symmetry of things. You know, when you start, at least in my perspective, and this isn't my perspective alone, I can't speak for anybody else, because this is like perspective also for me, right? Has been how I experience my reality. What I think tends to open up the lens. How I feel changes my reality. And I've been trying to compass that way, because I don't want my thoughts to be the thing that creates my reality. My experience and my sensations, and I'm not talking about emotions, I'm talking about the sensations that I feel, the signals that I get are the things that I am trying my fucking damnedest to tune into and change that model. Initially, it's not cost effective. And this is why I'm struggling with this at the moment, because the symmetry map has been something that I have so heavily invested my time and understanding into. And more recently, I've started to experience how the asymmetries alone in my body internally in my organs have fully, I wouldn't say disrupt, but have challenged that other tool that has been so beneficial for me. And it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. That tool is an imperatively important tool to still measure things by and to judge. I might say judge. Judgment's an important thing to be able to, it's an important skill to have, because it means survival. And at that level, when you're talking about, at least again, when I speak of this way, just take it in measure for all the stuff in the future that I'm talking from my empirical experience here. This is a window into my reality. Is that like it's an important survival mechanism, and you might say that a survival mechanism may or may not be a healthy thing, but it's like, I think, at least I feel, where everything we decidedly origin from is for survival. Is for survival, you know, and whether or not the choices we make are survival for ourselves or for the people that we choose to have around us, it's still based on survival, you know. So when you start looking at things in asymmetry within the body, let's return back to this, you start to realize that there are certain inertia points that start mechanisms in your body. Your heart does something different to what you think it does. You know, your lungs now serve a purpose other than breathing. Your liver serves another purpose other than bowel production. Kidneys, liver, other than detoxifying. You know, your pancreas and your spleen, your diaphragms, and your digestive system, and your sexual organs. They all serve more of a purpose than being a visceral item that autonomously keeps you alive. They're part of the experience of a movement protocol of life. You know, they're all part of this experience. And there's something, even though I'm struggling with it, I'm starting to experience a lot of freedom. A lot of freedom with understanding that there is another, I might say that this, as I'm accepting this, and as I'm starting to map it, my ability to become more resilient to life's chaoses is increasing. The signals that allow it to be so, to really pause and observe what reality I'm living in and experiencing. This is going to be like a really far-fetched, far-off, like, there are parallels to this stuff, right? A far-off, like, reference to what we're talking about here, but there are parallels. When you start seeing things in a certain reality or a lens, I might say, you actually start to see how these things really stretch out, especially with experience, of how these things stretch out far and wide and deep across your entire reality of life, you know. It's like the questions that are going through my processes, my head at the moment are like, okay, it's like, okay, there are certain things I think about. We're talking about nature's laws now, and that shit fascinates me. It absolutely fascinates me because we're not one without it, and if you don't understand it, it's gonna fuck you up. And we're gonna get fucked up anyways. We're getting fucked up all the time, right? But it's gonna fuck you up even more, right? When you don't. So I've often thought, fucking nature is out there that I have no respect for. That I fucking hate and I don't like, right? What is the thing in nature out there that makes my fucking blood boil every time I fucking see one of these things or even think about it? And my answer is ticks. I fucking hate those things with a fucking passion. And I don't know particularly why, but I think in my mind, this is the thing, I think and I feel it's so visceral how much I fucking hate these things, right? And, you know, it's like, it just goes to prove, like for me, how much you don't have to love something to have attention for it. And I hate it that much that's overcome my desire to even look into what they do, what their contribution to nature actually is. And I'm sure there's something there, but I'm just like, fuck you, ticks. I'm not gonna even fucking want to entertain the idea that you could be useful to fucking the universe. Go eat some shit and die. So, my point being here, because I'm kind of ranting about this thing, well, you're probably thinking, what the fuck has this got to do with ticks and geometry and shit? I think to myself, like, is there some sort of purpose within the frequencies of nature, is that this thing in its existence has, through the chains of the ecological framework, I'm not going to say balance because shit's not balanced. I'm telling you right now, nothing is ever balanced for any permanence. There's no permanence in balance, right? It's like, is there a purpose of these ticks that has some sort of butterfly effect that affects me? And is it reciprocal in a way that, like, my existence itself has an effect for it? And I don't know the answer. But the provoking thought is going to me, it's like, there are certain things in life that have an effect on you, and you have no effect on the other way around. So reciprocation isn't in existence there. So my question to myself is, when you start, my answer to myself, at least at this point, without any more inquisition, fucking ticks, right, is that, like, why have I had to, like, give attention to something that I have no effect on, and it has an effect on me? This is part of the asymmetry of life. This is part of the observation loop in terms of how you need to navigate and judge in order to survive, to develop your tools, to understand how to flourish in this short time, this impermanence that you have here, and not to live a life that's framed by the comfort of symmetry and geometry, but to understand that there is a lot to be understood, a lot to be experienced, a lot to be learned within life's chaoses, which is constantly apparent. Your resilience to such allows you to see the things and the maps and explore the terrain that we are all subjected to. So that is a Tuesday Mazcar chat. Symmetry. It's like the gods played a joke. Let's make them compass themselves under perfection by balance and mirror imaging, and make that the quest for symmetry and balance. Make that the quest, and give them mirrors so they can look at themselves and gaslight themselves into thinking that things are balanced. However, the few that are chosen that stand will realize and look deep enough with curiosity and play to understand that internally it's far from what we see on the surface. So enjoy that map.